First of all, I have a quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, and it goes as follows: "To laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty, to find the beauty in others, to leave the world a little bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition, to know that one's life has breathed easier because you lived here. This is to have succeeded." Ralph Waldo Emerson. And now we will say together, "We light this chalice for the warmth of love. We light this chalice for the energy of action. We light this chalice for the harmony of peace."
Thank you, Christy. It's my great pleasure to introduce our former minister and a welcome recall visitor whenever we can get him. This is Ernie. We all call him Ernie.
Yes.
And please welcome him.
Thank you, Barbara and Christine and Don, for your communications with me to come and speak to you again and be with you again. I love this congregation, and last time I saw you, we were in the restaurant over there in the back, but now you're down here. It's the first time I've spoken in South Carolina in a UU congregation. But it's good to be here, good to see you all, and there's something to be said, I think, for our service this morning, and the fact that it's kind of spontaneous. Because I think sometimes we get a little bit too rigid in our orders of service, and it's nice every now and then to just be spontaneous, you know, and just let things flow and let them happen. I had a friend who did street ministries for a while in New York or Chicago, I can't remember where it was, but he said the fun thing about worshiping with, in these street services, the people don't know how to worship, they don't know how to do it. So there's a lot of freedom and spontaneity. So I hope we can have that this morning, and I guess we will. I want to open our service with some words, a call to worship from our hymnal, and it's reading number. You all don't have hymnals, right? Right. Okay, so I'll just read it. It's reading 435, and it's by David Cedrone. And after that, Becky and I are going to play a song that we can all sing together. We come together this morning to remind one another to rest for a moment on the forming edges of our lives, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment, until we claim for ourselves awareness and gratitude, taking the time to look into one another's faces and see their communion, the reflection of our own eyes. This house of laughter and silence, memory and hope is hallowed by our presence together. And I'm sorry, that's Kathleen McTeague who wrote that. I know you can't shake hands or anything, but just turn around and just acknowledge the people around you. Becky? We're going to sing a song everybody knows, Down by the Riverside. No, is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah, Down by the Riverside. It's based on a passage from the prophet Isaiah. If you may be familiar with that passage, Isaiah is from the tribe of the farmers of the Israelite 12 tribes, and he's sick and tired of going to war, and he's had enough of it. So he says in this passage, in this verse, I'm going to lay down my sword and my shield and turn them into Plow and a Pruning hook. So think about that. Think about instead of bombing people, if we could drop bread on countries, how better the world would be. So I love this song, and the last verse, I haven't told Becky this yet. The last verse, I will do it real slow, and it's, I'm going to turn my sword and spear into a plow and a pruning hook. And we'll do it slow so you can get it. Okay. And the verses are, I'm going to lay down my sword and shield. The second verse, going to shake hands around the world. Third verse, going to shake hands with the Prince of Peace. Ready?
Gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. Gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, study, Lord, no more. Ain't gonna 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 study, Lord, no more. Gonna shake hands around the world, down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. Gonna shake hands around the world, down by the riverside, study, Lord, no more. Ain't gonna 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 study, Lord, no more. Gonna shake hands with the Prince of Peace down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. Gonna shake hands with the Prince of Peace down by the riverside, study, Lord, no more. Ain't gonna 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 study, Lord, no more. Let's slow it down a little bit. Gonna turn my sword and spear into a plow and a pruning hook. Plow and a pruning hook. Plow and a pruning hook. Gonna turn my sword and spear into a plow and a pruning hook. And study, Lord, no more. Ain't gonna 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 study, Lord, no more.
Thank you. Thank you. Whenever we gather together, we share our joys and our concerns with one another. That's very much a part of what we do in Unitarian Universalism. Ours is a community where we find connections. Ours is a community where we find meaning. Ours is a sharing community where our joys are amplified, a caring community where our sorrows are lessened. We take this moment to reflect on our joys and sorrows and acknowledge the mutual support of one another in this community. Would anyone like to share a joy or a concern? Just stay where you're seated and share from where you are. Yes, Nick.
I'm very proud of my wife. She is up on stage performing in a play in our little community theater called Tri Little Theater. And the title of the play really represents me. and it's called I Love You, You're Perfect, and Now Change.
I love it. Okay, don't let that word get out too much. Anybody? Yes, sir. David. Andy, sorry. Andy, just met you.
Our daughter came for a visit of a week, and it was a fabulous time. We enjoyed her presence, went to doctor's appointments with us, and I can't find enough words to say how proud we are of her. She called this morning to say she was home, and we're very thankful that she was here.
Thank you. Yes, Nine Lee.
I am very grateful for these two behind us, Andy and Kitty. They bring us here, and we eat together, and they shared their daughter with us, and they are true blue friends.
Thank you. Good to have friends. Yes, Don.
My joy is that my son is turning 47 today. My sorrow is that I have a son that's 47.
Wait till he gets to 50.
Yes,
I'm 60.
I would like to hold the Haitians under the bridge in prayer today because it's really concerning them.
yes. Thank you for reminding us. The Haitians. She'd like us to remember the plight of the Haitian people. Yes.
I'm Evelyn Erb. I'm very pleased to see Ernie here. He was our first minister in Transylvania County, Brevard. And we first used to meet at Brevard College. And I think that's where we first met him. And we didn't know how it was going to work out, Methodist minister. But it worked out really fantastic. And I remember the first time he came to one of our parties, I was telling Nana Lee, he walked past the table where we had the wine bottles for anybody to pour themselves a glass of wine. And I think he stopped there and just stared at that table for I don't know how many minutes. I think he hadn't seen anything like that, but for us it was normal.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. It was great to be part of the congregation. Thank you for your support. Anybody else have something like? Yes, Andy.
Well, I have a sorrow in that I didn't call the person who was doing the food today, the hospitality person, and she didn't show up, and so she's forgotten too. And so that was a good lesson for me. So I will be calling, be sure to call whenever you have a responsibility. We added November 7 to this list. And hopefully next time we will have a new list for 6 more months. And hospitality, I decided, I realized that it's too much of a burden on one person. So I would like to see at least 2 people, if not 3 people, sign up. But since we're small, probably 2 people, take the responsibility for the food, and they would have to work it out between themselves. So there will be 2 names to sign up for hospitality. Thank you.
Yes, Barbara.
Well, I guess it's a joy and a concern. I was concerned with the possible outcome of the rally in D.C. over the weekend because my son-in-law is assigned to cybersecurity for the White House and that area. So he was on duty. My joy is it didn't really happen. And I think that's an even bigger joy because it shows, I think, a lack of interest or a waning of some interest from this opposition is to everything.
Let's share in a moment of silence, and then I'll close with some thoughts. Silence can exist without speech, but speech cannot live without silence. Listen to the speech of others. Listen even more to their silence. To pray is to listen to the revelations of nature, to the meaning of events. To listen to music is to listen also to silence, find the stillness deepen and enrich. Those words are from Jacob Trapp. Let's continue our service with our offerings. And I think, Don, would you want to say something about the special offering today?
We're planning to pass the hat twice. The second one is for the refugees of Haiti, and for that matter, the Haiti problems there with the hurricane. So the UU Service Committee has a special fund for that. And if you're like me and forgot your checkbook, in the next week we could send our contributions to the post office box in Tryon, which is on the top of every newsletter.
So for all those in Haiti and all those who have
What's for Haiti? Is this for
unique challenges,
This is the first one.
one thing they can have is hope. And this is a favorite song of my brother's, who is currently in kind of a hospice stage with Parkinson's up in Maine. So in his honor and for the hope of all the people who need it,
Oh, that's the church one.
I'm giving you this song. If the morning star still disappears behind the sky of blue, people rise and go to work like they always do. As long as young folks fall in love, kids keep growing tall, the earth below and the sky above, there's hope for one and all. If the moon still moves the deep blue sea and rules the hearts of men, the world keeps turning quietly, here we go again. If the winter grass turns April green, when the rain begins to fall, if there's water flowing from the stream, there's hope for one and all. There's hope for you and me, my friend, with our backs against the wall. There's waters flowing from the stream, there's hope for one and all. If a man still does the best he can, though no one cares, if a mother's rock their babes to sleep, say a little prayer. If the old car starts when the cold wind blows way down in the fall, if there's one good spark in the fall dark, there's hope for one and all. There's hope for you and me, my friend, with our backs against the wall. If there's one good spark in the fall dark, there's hope for one and all. There's hope for you and me, my friend, with our backs against the wall. If there's one good spark in the fall dark, there's hope for one and all.
Becky.
Sure.
Thank you for reminding us how important it is to hold on to hope when our backs are against the wall. Back in January this year, the doctor put me on high blood pressure medication because my blood pressure was high, and told me that I needed to probably slow down a little bit. And not long after that, a couple of days, I went into a crisis. Most people have a midlife crisis. I'm 71 years old. I figure if that's midlife, I'm going to live till I'm 142. But I guess you'd call it an aging crisis. And I was kind of depressed. I cried and carried on and said to my wife, we've only got so many years left, and let's try to make the best we can out of it. And she was wondering what was going on with me. But it just suddenly dawned on me that most of my life is behind me. I mean, you all had that experience, I'm sure, having that experience. Most of your life is behind you. And then what happened was strange, because then I started having memories that I'd never had before about my past and the places I've been, the people that I knew. Just sort of flooded into my mind, and for days and days and days I just spent remembering the past. And I think part of that was just part of the process of aging. Now, I know that aging is a relative thing. You know, we can experience the feelings of aging at any age. I mean, when you think about it, the moment we're born, we start aging. So anyway, in that sort of, I wouldn't call it depression as much as or anxiety. It was just really just strange. It was like I was entering into a foreign land, a place that I'd never been before. And so it was a mixture of wonder. You know, wonder has that mixture of terror and joy in it. But during that time, I went back to my favorite poets, the Romantic English poets, and I opened to one of my favorites, Wordsworth. And I read his poem, let's see, how does it go? Intimations of Immortality from Recollections of Early Childhood. That's a mouthful. But when I read that, it's like I was reading it for the first time, even though I'd read it many times before that. Because when I read it, I thought, you know, that's what he's dealing with in this poem. He's dealing with aging and the sense of loss and grief for what has gone. And then in that, finding the joy of life through watching children play. And so reading that was really helpful to me, because it said to me, you're not alone. People have dealt with this. Everybody deals with it. You're not alone in dealing with it. And it gave me a lot of comfort. So I want to read some of that poem to you. It's a long poem. I printed it out. It's 5 pages. And I won't read all 5 pages to you unless you want me to. But we might be here. I noticed there's no clock on the wall back there. That's kind of dangerous, you know. Because even at the UU Church in Brevard, there was a clock on the wall. And at first I thought, what's the clock back there for? Nobody can see it but me. Duh. Anyway, this is from his poem, Wordsworth. His dates are 1770 to 1850. The child is father of the man, and I could wish my days to be bound each to each by natural piety. There was a time when meadow, grove, and stream, the earth and every common sight, to me did seem apparelled in celestial light. The glory and the freshness of a dream. It is not now as it hath been of yore. Turn wheresoever I may, by night or day, the things which I have seen, I now can see no more. The rainbow comes and goes, and lovely is the rose. The moon doth with delight look round her when the heavens are bare. Waters on a starry night are beautiful and fair. The sunshine is a glorious birth, but yet I know wherever I go that there has passed away a glory from the earth. Now, while the birds thus sing a joyous song, and while the young lambs bound as to the tabor sound, to me alone there came a thought of grief. A timely utterance gave that thought relief. And again I'm strong. The cataracts blow their trumpets from the steep. No more shall grief of mine the season draw. I hear the echoes through the mountains throng. The wind comes to me from the fields of sleep. And all the earth is gay. Land and sea give themselves up to jollity. And with the heart of May does every beast keep holiday. Thou child of joy, shout round me. Let me hear thy shouts, thy happy shepherd boy. Our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. The soul that rises with us, our life star, has elsewhere its setting and cometh from afar. Not entire forgetfulness, and not in utter nakedness, but trailing clouds of glory do we come from God who is our own. Heaven lies about us in our infancy. Shades of the prison house begin to close upon the growing boy. But he beholds the light, and whence it comes. He sees in it his joy. The youth who daily farther from the east must travel still as nature's priest. And by the vision splendid is on his way attended. At length the man perceives it die away and fade into the light of common day. Sing, ye birds, sing a joyous song, and let the young lambs bound as to the tabor sound. We in thought will join your throng, ye that pipe and ye that play, ye that through your hearts today feel the gladness of May. What through the radiance which was once so bright be now forever taken from my sight? Though nothing can bring back the hour of splendor in the grass, of glory in the flower, we will grieve not. Rather find strength in what remains behind, in the primal sympathy we having been must ever be, in the soothing thoughts that spring out of human suffering, in the faith that looks through death, in years that bring the philosophic mind. And O ye fountains, meadows, hills, and groves, forebode not any severing of our loves. The innocent brightness of a newborn day is lovely yet. Another race has been, and other poems are won. Thanks to the human heart by which we live. Thanks to its tenderness, its joys and fears. To me, the meanest flower that blows can give thoughts that do often lie too deep for tears. Woody Allen said, "I'm not afraid to die, I just don't want to be there when it happens." Well, that's okay for him, but I'd kind of like to be there when it happens. A friend of mine went to visit another friend in the church who was on his deathbed, and when he went to see him, it looked as if the person had died. My friend stood there looking at this person, and suddenly he opened his eyes, and my friend just kind of jumped back. And he said, I thought you had died. He said, well, I was practicing death. So that's kind of what we can do. We can kind of practice for death. Mark Twain said, I'm not really afraid to die because I was dead billions and billions of years before I was born. He said, so I don't suffer any, I don't suffer from that knowledge. There's that saying, from eternity we come, and to eternity we go. And so you think about children, they're probably a lot closer to that eternity they've just come from. I don't think Mark Twain was dead for billions of years before he was born. I think he was alive all those billions of years before he was born, and his birth was just a manifestation of all that life that went before him. That's the way I would say that. I want to talk about aging and dying and death, but I want to give one big reservation about that, and that is that what I'm saying is just my own subjective opinions about it, and you all probably know a lot more about it than I do. One thing I've learned as I grow older is don't give advice to people who are older than you. Take advice from them. So I want to talk about that, but I want to talk about that in terms of how we age, our dying and our death, in terms of doing it with grace and dignity. Trying our best to do it with as much grace and dignity as we can. Now I know that I'm talking about something that's really out of our control. We can't really control what's going to happen. We can't really choose exactly how we're going to age or die in our death. We can't really choose that. What we can do, though, I think, is we can nurture among ourselves sentiments and attitude toward that whole process. Not to see it so much as something bad or negative, but to be able to sort of go with it, if you know what I mean. When the doctor told me that I had to slow down, that's that line in that poem where Wordsworth says, the things I've seen I can see no more. For me, it was the things I once did, I can't do anymore. And I've had to slow down, and that's not been easy. But it's a reminder to me that you can't do the things that you used to do. And I have to say to myself, that's okay. That's okay. It's not bad. It's not a bad thing that you can't do the things you used to do. You can turn it into something good. You can fill those times where you did all that stuff. You can fill that time with other things. For example, developing the philosophic mind, as Wordsworth referred to. The philosophic mind comes from the idea of Plato, who said philosophy, all that philosophy was preparation for death. That's what philosophy was. So we can be philosophical about it. I don't want to intellectualize it. I don't want to romanticize it or analyze it or mystify it. What I want to share with you is just the thoughts that I've had about it as I've entered into that place I'm in my life. I think there are two extremes as we sort of chart our path through this labyrinth of aging, dying, and death. There's two extremes that I myself want to avoid. And the Greek myth of the Cyclades, the six-headed monster and the vortex in the ocean. If one doesn't get you, the other one does. So we sort of want to avoid those two dangers, I think, as we age. The one extreme, I think, comes from the biblical point of view of death. That death is punishment for sin. I went to my brother-in-law's funeral some years ago. It was a little church, very conservative church, on the outskirts of Emerson County, and the preacher said he died because he was a sinner. And I thought to myself, no, he died because he went into insulin shock. That's why he died. He didn't die because he was a sinner. Well, you all know the story. If you're not familiar with the Bible, then you may not know the story, but Adam and Eve are in the garden, and there are two trees. There's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of immortality, and God says to Adam, don't touch the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Don't eat from that fruit. Don't even touch it, because if you touch it, you're going to die. We all know the story. The serpent is there. He tempts Eve. If you eat this, you'll be like God, and you'll know the difference between good and evil. And that's probably a good thing, because I used to tell my students at the college, would you like to have a roommate who didn't know the difference between good and evil? And they would look at me like, So to gain the knowledge of good and evil, so Eve eats the fruit. It's not an apple, by the way. It's probably a fig. She eats the fruit. Her eyes are open. She sees. She gives it to Adam. He eats. His eyes are open. And then God comes along and punishes them because they not only disobeyed, but they brought death into the world through their disobedience. And we all know, if we're raised up in the Christian church, that whole scenario equates to the doctrine of original sin. In other words, that genetic code, I'm talking science language, that they got through disobedience has passed down, and we've inherited it. That's the Christian doctrine of original sin. So, in other words, we're all born sinners, and we're all going to die because of sin. And Paul says in one of his letters, the wages of sin is death. About 20 years now, Andy was asking me a while ago to share some of my story out of Methodism into UU. Well, that was one of my ways out of Methodism, because about 20 years ago, I made the choice to totally reject that mythology. And I reject it. Now, other people don't reject it, and that's fine with them. If they want to believe that, as long as they don't hurt anybody, that's fine. But for me personally, I put that mythology out of my head. It took me a while, and I still struggle with it. But sin is not the worst thing that can happen to you. I'm sorry. Death is not the worst thing that can happen to you. And death is not a punishment for sin. And death is not your executioner. In fact, you can make death your friend. You know that song, Simon and Garfunkel, "Hello Darkness, My Old Friend"? You can make death a friend. You can talk to it. Because what death can teach you is how to live. The thought of death can teach you how to live in the moment, in each day at a time. So you don't have to see death as the worst possible thing that can happen to you. The other extreme in our culture that we get through commercialism, you probably know what I'm going to say, is denial of death. Deny it. Don't talk about it. Don't use the word death, or so-and-so died. Say they passed away, or they kicked the bucket. But don't use that word, because we don't want to talk about it. We deny it. One of my favorite quotes from Chief Seattle that I discovered back when I was a teenager was, "Death, there is no death, only a change of worlds." And I held on to that saying from Chief Seattle for the longest time in my life. There's no death, there's only a change of worlds. But then I realized, is that a denial? Because there is death. People die. We die. Our loved ones die. My grandfather died 40 years ago. He's gone. He's not there. I miss his presence. But yet, if I think about his death from a non-physical point of view, from an emotional point of view, he's alive. He's alive. I feel his presence. I dream about him. I feel his love for me as a child when I was growing up. So I could say in that sense, he's not gone. He's here. He used to love to sing. We would take rides and he would sing. One of his favorite songs was, "When I grow too old to dream, your love will live in my heart." And I always remembered that. And so I say to myself, I lived in his heart when I was a kid. And now he lives in mine. The memories of my grandfather. My mother's 96 years old, and she is in a retirement center. And she was living with us for about a year, but it just got a little bit too much for us to take care of. So she's in a retirement community, and as I said, she's 96. But when I go to see her and I ask her how she's doing, you know, she says she's doing fine, but then she'll say, you know, I don't know what I'm here for. And she said, I don't know the point in my being 96 years old. And she said that, you know, I sit in my chair, I watch TV, I do puzzles, stuff like that. You know, which made me think about the question, what is the value of just being alive? Well, I think there's a heck of a lot of value in just being alive. You know, in our search for meaning, oftentimes we define ourselves by what we do. Do. And when you meet people, they'll say, well, what do you do for a living? So it's all about doing. And we forget that it's about being, too. And it's about just being alive. Our first principle says the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And it doesn't say after that because of what they do or what they did. It just says the inherent worth and dignity of every person. So I believe my mother has dignity. And she tries to be as nice to people as she can. And I think she brings a lot to the people around her, just being who she is. So I'd say the value of being alive is a good enough value and a good enough reason just to be alive and to experience life. Martin Luther King, one of his favorite quotes, I've kept this with me, I wish I could memorize it, but Martin Luther King, the title of it is If a Man. He says, you may be 38 years old, as I happen to be, and one day some great opportunity stands before you and calls you to stand up for some great principle, some great issue, some great cause, and you refuse to do it because you're afraid. You refuse to do it because you want to live longer. You're afraid that you will lose your job. Or you're afraid that you will be criticized, or you will lose your popularity. Well, you may go on and live until you're 90. But you're just as dead at 38 as you are at 90. And the cessation of breathing in your life is but the belated announcement of an earlier death of the Spirit. Death of the Spirit. So we can be dead already if we live our lives in fear. You know, that's what I see happening to this country right now. It's just fear. Fear-based. Fear-based politics. Fear-based religions. You're going to go to hell if you don't do this and don't do that. You're going to go to heaven if you do this and do that. Well, this is fear-mongering. Fear destroys life. The question is not, are we going to die? The question is, are we really living? The worst possible thing that for me that could happen to me is that I never lived at all because I allowed fear to make decisions for what I was going to do in my life. So if some great cause presents itself to you and you have an opportunity to say something or do something or stand up and do it, then King would say, do it. Don't be afraid. I think the biggest obstacle for me in terms of aging is my ego. My ego gets in the way. My ego wants to hold on to things I've done in the past. My ego wants to overwork when my body says you need to rest. My ego wants to keep going. My ego wants to be young. I look in the mirror and say, oh, I look about 30. My wife says, nah, not really. So it's ego, you know, just putting this ego in its place. Jesus said something that I think is important in thinking about what we're thinking about. And he said, return again and become as a little child. Return again and become as a little child. I like that. To be able to, as a child, to be able to keep wonder alive. You know, people say, well, there's nothing new in life. Well, everything is new if it's just your attitude. If you change your attitude. I was taking some camp kids on a flower walk, and their parents, it was parents' weekend, and I was showing them a flower. We were going up to Devil's Courthouse, and a man stood off in the distance, and I motioned for him to come over and look. He said, you seen one, you seen them all. No, I said, well, no, this, I would say this is a new one. Something you've never seen before. So keeping wonder alive as a child, keeping that innocence alive. And that's what Wordsworth was talking about. Seeing these children was reminding him of the joy of childhood. And that other aspect of being a child is that dependence. I mean, we are going to become more dependent. And that's just a fact. And I think to sort of go with that, be okay with it, as much as we can. Joseph Campbell, my favorite mythologist, said, when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you should do is not read the newspaper. The first thing you should do is put on your favorite music. And so I practice that, and I've been doing that. And my favorite song I'm listening to now is, oh, what a beautiful morning, oh, what a beautiful day. I've got a beautiful feeling, everything's going my way. I don't like that last little line because not everything's going my way. Another thing that children do is try to find the moment, live in the moment. Just live in the moment. Find the moment if you can. It's hard to do because things are pulling at us, but to live in the moment. To reawaken enchantment. Life is enchanting. And I said to my wife the other day, we're always saying, oh, this is strange, where we live in, these are strange people, these are strange. I said, I'm going to stop saying everything is strange, and I'm going to start trying to think of everything as wonderful. Because wonderful has that element of strangeness in it, but it also has that element of curiosity and joy in it. It's kind of a mixed bag. The worst thing that can happen to us as we age and face our death is the thought that we may not have ever really lived in the first place. And so I think the question that we need to ask ourselves on a day-to-day basis is, what are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? We can't control what happens out there, but we can choose and control what happens here in our reactions to it and how we deal with it. Thank you. How are we doing on time? There's no clock back there.
25 after.
Okay, so that means we have 5
5
minutes.
minutes.
Okay, good. Well, I'll just preach this other sermon that I wrote. This is a song I sing to remind me to slow down. And sing along if you want to. Slow down, you move too fast. Got to make the morning last. Just kicking down the cobblestones, looking for fun and feeling groovy. Hello, lamppost, what you knowin'? Come to watch your flowers growing. Ain't you got no rhyme for me? Do all is groovy. Got no needs to do, no promises to keep. I'm dappled and dazzled and ready to sleep. Let the morning time cast all its petals on me. Life, I love you, all is groovy. Slow down, you're moving too fast. Got to make the morning last. reading 664 by Sarah Moores Campbell, and the title of it is Give Us the Spirit of the Child. Give us the spirit of the child. Give us the child who lives within. The child who trusts. The child who imagines. The child who sings. The child who receives without reservation. The child who gives without judgment. Give us a child's eyes that we may receive the beauty and the freshness of this day like a sunrise. Give us a child's ears that we may hear the music of mythical times. Give us a child's heart that we may be filled with wonder and delight. Give us a child's faith that we may be cured of our cynicism. Give us the spirit of the child who is not afraid to need, who is not afraid to love. Thank you. Have a nice day. Thank you for coming.
Without the
chalice. Here we go. Thank you, Christine, for reminding us.
Do you have the closing?
Well, I can get some. Oh, not
Oh, you want to put it out first?
Do I read first? Is that it?
Read first.
Okay. The years of all of us are short, our lives precarious. Our days and nights go hurrying on, and there is scarcely time to do little that we might. Yet we find time for bitterness, petty treason, and evasion. What can we do to strengthen our heart enough to lose their littleness?